What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 384. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and of course, joining me on the line from Denver, Colorado, the three-point champion himself. It's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, have you ever hit a three-pointer in a game of basketball?
Oh yeah.
You're the specialist now, huh?
You don't make it to fourth on the Dire Wolf basketball power rankings without hitting some nice threes.
Yes, that is absolutely true. This week on the show, we got a whole lot lined up for you. Two main things that we're going to be covering. This is the Aether Revolt sunset, so it is time to say goodbye to Aether Revolt. And I don't know how to say this without it sounding more harsh than I mean it, but I don't.
Finally.
Yeah, I don't really feel bad about that at all. I'm kind of ready to say bye-bye to Aether Revolt. But I don't mean it in that, like, I don't like the format. I drafted the hell out of it. I just kind of ready to let it go. We've also got, of course, Amonkhet previews, exclusive Limited Resources preview cards from Amonkhet. We've got 5 of them, all uncommons.
Just to be clear, it is Amonkhet. Amonkhet?
It's Amonkhet.
Amonkhet?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I'll have to know this at the Pro Tour.
Yeah, you got a few weeks, don't worry. But we've got 5 uncommon previews, and if you follow us on Twitter, you will have seen those, or on the blog, or on the Patreon. But we're going to talk about them here and kind of get a little in depth on those cards. But let's get into it here. Before we start on our main topics, we've got a few things to cover. First things first, our sponsor, ChannelFireball.com. What a partnership we have with them. 2 entities, Limited Resources and Channel Fireball, with similar goals as far as getting you better at Magic. And I've been really happy that since we've joined forces. It's been a while now, but we've got our end over here, Luis and I doing Limited Resources, and trying to do everything we can to help you improve your limited game and in many ways your Magic game in general. And then, of course, on channelfireball.com, right on the front page there, you can find awesome free content from some of the best Magic players in the world. That's right. Some of the absolute peak all-timers make content for Channel Fireball, including Luis, Owen Turtenwald, the list goes on. And they're there to help you get better and also entertain you sometimes too. And that's really kind of the nice combo that they go for. Of course, while you're there, you can pick up all the stuff you need that's Magic related. You can get supplies, you can find apparel, you can get singles, you can get sealed product, all of it there. You can even sell your cards back to them for a 30% trade-in bonus for store credit and turn them into more Magic cards. It's just the place to go on the internet, the best, channelfireball.com. If you want to support the show directly, you can do so. It's patreon.com/limited resources. All the information is there. It's super easy to get set up, and you get some nice little perks. One of them is you get to submit questions for the Question of the Week thread. And this one comes from Alexander, who says, "Hey, Marshall. Hey, Luis. I mostly play Constructed, but I also like to play a lot of Limited. However, I often run into a problem. In Modern or Legacy, I can play the same deck a ton and get really good at it, but that's not something you can do in Limited. I like being familiar with my deck, and sometimes I find myself unconsciously forcing a deck that I've drafted before because I'll know how to play it. Is there anything you can recommend to help me get around this?" Yeah, interesting stuff here, Luis. Alexander has really highlighted one of the core differences between Limited and Constructed. And it happens to be one of the reasons why we love Limited so much, is because the diverse play patterns, the diverse games, you just so rarely see the same things playing out over and over again in Limited, where in Constructed, that's almost the goal. But it can lead you down some weird paths if you sit down to draft and you're thinking to yourself, well, I know this blue-green deck, and even though, black-red seems open, I don't feel as comfortable with it, so I'm just going to stick with blue-green and just see what happens. That isn't a great way to maximize your win percentage, is it?
It's not. And you are right in that Constructed is like a pattern matching game almost, where you try to identify the important interactions and the way the games play out and build decks to take advantage of that. Limited is just so much more just knowing fundamentally how to play Magic and how to approach novel situations, because almost every game of Limited you play is just going to be very different from other games you have played. And I know what the trap that Alexander falls into here. Maybe I don't fall into it for the same reason, but you still do end up in a situation where you draft the same deck too often. And I think that you should try to specifically get outside your comfort zone there, because if you approach limited with the same mindset as constructed, you're not actually going to improve as much as you need to, because they are just different in that regard.
Totally.
So
yeah.
So reevaluating your rankings and trying to figure out, like, all right, I'm just going to try to draft blue-green. I will draft white-red. I'm just going to intentionally not draft white-red. It's a fine place to be. That's a good way to expand your comfort zone a bit.
It is, and I think it's the way to think about it is it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain. You know, you shove yourself into the deep end of the pool, but you learn how to swim, and you just need to force yourself to do it. Even though, yes, I know you see every single one of those cards for your pet deck fly by, and you're thinking, oh, I could have had such a good deck. Realize that you may be sacrificing some immediate equity in this particular draft that you're in, but that you will be gaining equity for future drafts. And that, of course, is always a good strategy. For people that watch me draft on my draft videos, Luis draft on his, in the early stages, we'll often just take a rare because we've never played it. We'll often just push into a strategy hard and just say, is this a thing? Right? What are the ups and downs to this? Does it actually work? And that's, even though we know, I've already played this black-green deck, I could totally play it again, and I could probably have a pretty good record with it. I'm going to push in a different direction. And, you know, when you get to the later part of a format, that really pays off. So force yourself to do it. Alexander, I know it's not easy, but you should definitely push in that direction. Okay, Luis, let's get into this. We've got the Aether Revolt Sunset Show, and we should start off with our last Aether Revolt Crack-A-Pack here. This one comes from Brian, who I met at Grand Prix Vancouver. Thank you for that. Let's see if we get anything good for the listeners here, as far as, you know, maybe our rares or whatever. All right, first one up. Good card, Chandra's Revolution.
All right, that's solid first pick.
Mm-hmm. Metallic Rebuke, no, not as good. Audacious Infiltrator, that's not as good as Revolution, right?
True Name Nemesis? No.
Whoa. That's a little much. I mean, True Name costs 3. Renegade's Getaway. This card can just get away from our pick.
I actually never cast that card.
I didn't either. I think it's bad. Highspire Infusion.
Not a card I'm going to first pick.
No. Renegade Map. Did Renegade Map go down for you over the course of the format?
Yes, this card was highly overrated. I think people overvalued the improvised part and seemed to think you were going to be 3 colors more often than you were. This card really wasn't that good.
No, it's weird because this one really did seem to be the mid-section on all of the stuff you wanted to do, right? It's a good revolt enabler. It's a good improvise enabler. And it even gives you the benefit of some mana fixing and you know, making sure you hit your lands or whatever. And for some reason, it didn't quite live up. I think that, like you said, the good improvised decks were 2 colors anyway. And so if you were going to play a 1-mana card like this, I mean, you could pick up something else, you know, like a, what's it called, an Implement or something like that. And then the Revolt decks just kind of didn't really come together. So Bastion Inventor. I know you like this one. It's a good card.
I do. I would still take Chandra's Revolution, though.
I would, too. Universal Solvent. Didn't solve a whole lot. Maybe on our underrated list, Lothnu Sailback.
I think Lothnu Sailback was appropriately
unbeatable.
rated.
Is that how you would describe it?
That's not how I would describe it.
You would not say
you can Chandra's Revolution it. So therefore,
never lost. Oh, that's true. All right. Well, I have these two sitting right in front of me, so obviously Chandra's Revolution wins that fight. Implement of Improvement. That's the white one that gains you 2 life. Not a high pick.
Yeah.
Here's one of the few mana sinks in the format, though it still feels like it didn't quite get there. It's Cogwork Assembler, the 3 mana.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
You knew it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I would still Chandra's Revolution, even though Cogwork Assembler's colorless.
Yeah, I would too. I did do some cool stuff with it. It was a legit mana sink. It just wasn't something that you felt like you had some engine set up that you would just auto win the game. It was like, well, I have an effect. Pima Aether Seer. That's the 4 mana 3/2, and you get energy equal to the highest power of your creatures when it enters a battlefield, and you can pay 3 energy to have a creature block this turn of Fable.
It's a card that has some really good upside. Like, they're in the right board position, it does some good work. But I still think you're just going to take Chandra's Revolution and just start with a safe pick there.
Same. All right, here's one that I actually am going to take over Chandra's Revolution. It's Maverick Thopterist.
Oh, yes. I would start with Maverick Thopterist. Your Blu-ray Improvise is just a good deck, and this is a great card for that deck. So, yeah. And it's good even if you don't really improvise. I will pay 5 mana for this effect and not be dissatisfied.
Totally. All right, good. All right, so here's we're kind of interesting one. We've got Aether Geode Miner is our rare. That's the 2 mana, 1 and a white, 3/1. Whenever it attacks, you get 2 energy. You can pay 2 energy to exile it and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. We actually have a fighter here. Aether Geode Miner is a good little aggressive card. It can be difficult to kill, and it enables Revolt, and it's only 1 color versus the Thopterist, which is, maybe a little bit more consistent in what it does to the battlefield, but it's harder to cast as a blue-red spell.
Yeah, I do like Aether Geode Miner. I think the card is quite good, but I think I would start with Maverick Thopterist.
I would too. Look, white is a color that I think is fine. I think people have panned it unnecessarily, though it's still not really where I want to start off. And the Thopterist kind of is, like, it goes into a deck that I know. Also, if you do end up in green, it's not a reprehensible splash to put the Thopterist in your deck. And I just feel like the power level is much higher than the Miner. Even though I think the Miner is a good card, I just think it's a more specific card. If they play it on turn 2, it is a pain. I mean, it really is. It hits hard and it's hard to kill. But if they play it on turn 5, it's like, well, a lot of things can block this and make it not as good. Where the Thopterist, the turn you play it is a game-swinging play. I mean, it's hard to imagine a board state that doesn't have a Thopterist, then you put a Thopterist down with its 2 friends, and you're just like, oh, and I'm still really behind or whatever. The card just, kind of dominates. Yeah,
according to the only metric that matters, quadrant theory, it's good in all the quadrants.
Exactly, and that really does matter to me. That's an important measure.
For winning games or for branding?
For winning games, which is the name of the brand, by the way. One thing interesting, though, is that it really does come down to we're taking on extra risk to take a gold card here, and I'm just comfortable doing that. I'll just do that here. So, all right, Maverick Thopterist, you're leading us into the dark night of no more Aether Revolt, and I'll put the Aether Geode Miner with the other cards that we'll do on our next giveaway.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to be overly negative about the set because I actually, and we'll get into this, but I actually think it's fine. I haven't done an Aether Revolt draft in like a month.
Yeah. Yeah, the last one I did, it was weird for me. And like you said, we'll talk about this, but I have to reflect that because for me, what happened was I was playing it all the time. I was making videos, I was doing it. I'm like, okay, another draft, here we go. And then was it the
Modern
Cube
Masters?
Or was it Modern Masters? Whatever the first one that came out, and I think it was the Cube first, right? I think the
Cube before that, yeah.
Yeah, or it was the Modern Cube. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was controversial, but I liked it. I actually liked it a lot, and I played it quite a bit, and it was really weird because I hadn't really thought about Aether Revolt limited in that way, and then I thought about going back to do it again, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And then Modern Masters came out, and I'm like, all right, forget it. And I don't think I'll draft. I probably just won't ever draft it again, to be honest. Like, thinking about it, like if they brought it back as a flashback draft, I'd be like, not super excited. If I never saw another Aether Chaser in my life again, I think I'd be fine with that. But it's weird because I say these things and it sounds harsh, right? It sounds like I'm kind of bashing the format, but I actually really enjoyed it and I drafted a lot of it too. It wasn't like one of those formats where I'm just like, I don't really get this, I'm just not going to do it. I drafted it all the way up until that Modern Cube came out and I drafted it a lot. And I never felt like I don't want to do this anymore or what's going on. So,
well, I guess our first question will let us get into this.
Yeah.
If you could summarize the set in one sentence, what would it be?
Yeah, and for me, it was a bunch of near misses that combine into a fine draft format. I felt like there were things that didn't quite come together or didn't capture my imagination or what I like about drafting or something. But it kind of worked. I don't know. Like, I don't know what this recipe is that makes it like perfect. But like I said, I drafted it and it felt repeatable. I did not feel like I was just experiencing the same thing over and over. So shrug. I don't know. I can't pinpoint that I loved it, but I drafted it a lot and I enjoyed it when I did.
For me, it was actually just one word, or I guess two with a hyphen. Kaladesh Light.
I see.
It's how I felt. And so here, I think, was my issue with the format, is that it was a continuation of a lot of the themes of Kaladesh with, like, I think a slightly faster format and slightly weaker themes.
That's interesting.
And I had done so many Kaladesh drafts that it just didn't feel good. So
I did too.
I was like pre-burned out on Aether Revolt before it even started. So, I mean, I did draft Aether Revolt. I did a fair amount of drafts before the Pro Tour. I did some after, but I hit a wall pretty quickly. And I have to imagine part of it is I did like 60 Kaladesh drafts or whatever.
Right.
I did just a million of those, and these cards weren't new enough or different enough that it ended up really grabbing me.
One of the other things I like that you said Kaladesh Light, because when you were just saying that was really clicking with me. I felt very similar, except for, you know what? I preferred triple Kaladesh. Like, I feel like the format is less good, than it was before. Like, it wasn't just the timing. Like, if Aether Revolt Limited came out and then Kaladesh came out, I would be like, I like Kaladesh better. The energy stuff was really fun. Whirler Virtuoso, I miss you, man. I like that format a lot.
Yeah, and I think that, like, this feeling like a slightly worse version of a format I drafted a ton of, which I did like a lot, obviously, was just not enough to really grab me. So
yeah. Okay.
That's kind of how I ended up. That's kind of how I ended up down on Aether Revolt compared to other sets. Even though I think without that, like if you presented this format to me and I'd never drafted Kaladesh, I would be pretty happy with this.
Yeah, I think so too. I do. It's tough because obviously, we keep it real on the show. We're honest about the way we feel about these things, but it can easily come off as being negative, even though, like I said, I drafted and enjoyed the format. Let's get in some of the details here. What turned out to be the best archetypes in the set?
Red-based aggro, especially with Iron Tread Crusher as like a standout common.
Yeah.
Any deck with Winding Constrictor, black-green counters, basically was good if you had a Winding Constrictor.
Yeah, it was absurd if you had, like, it was one of the best if you opened a Winding Constrictor and ended up in black-green. It was just absurd. And I think it was a fine deck on its own, too. It had all the tools to win. It just wasn't a particularly synergistic deck without the Constrictor.
Right. And then Blue-Red Improvise.
Yeah.
So those seem like the best, though. I think Blue-Black Improvise also was like maybe the fourth contender there.
Okay. Speaking of archetypes, what was the worst, I'm going to put this in air quotes, archetype that you actually drafted? We were talking about it with Alexander there on our question of the week from Patreon. You and I will push in some pretty crazy directions early in a format to kind of see what's there. Did you ever push the boundaries a little?
Yeah, so this is not the last time you might hear about this card. Whirler Maker, Blue Control. Or
Whirler
really,
Maker?
It didn't need the Whirler Maker, but it was basically Blue Control that was trying to, like...
You are obsessed with Whirler Maker. You have problems, man.
It's just very good. Basically, like, a Blue Control decks I kept trying to make work, and, like, every now and then they would give me plausible deniability, but for the most part, I don't think they're actually very good.
Yeah, they were really tough to make. The deck that I put down for this was, like, looking back, I laugh at it. It was Black-White Revolt with no hidden stockpile. And, like, that to me is the reason to play that deck, but I thought innocently, I thought, oh, this will work. And I just, like, never killed anything with my Harpooner that I took, like, second or whatever. And I'm just looking at my hand, like, none of this works. I kept playing Countless Gears Renegades and they're just 2/2s. And I'm like, I don't understand this. I thought I was going to go off and I didn't. I even played it at the GP in Sealed and it was similar results, though. I did have one hidden stockpile in that deck. Starting off your draft, Luis, what was the funky or kind of cool rare that you hoped to see and build around when you opened up your pack?
I never really got to do this, but the mini Cruel Ultimatum Dark Intimations.
You never cast a Dark Intimations?
No, it seemed pretty sweet.
Poor soul. I got to cast it once. I mean, once ever, but. And
then Tezzeret the Schemer, the blue-black Planeswalker. I did like drafting blue-black artifacts already, and Tezzeret was a cool way to do that.
I love that. Yeah. The card that I never did was Mechanized Production.
I have tried and failed to produce mechanically.
Yeah. I mean, it just sucks because, like, you have such high hopes, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to put this on a Prophetic Prism. I'm going to be drawing extra cards every turn. I'm just going to win the game. I can cast anything. And it gives you, I like cards like this that change the dynamic. Alternate win condition cards to me are like, they don't really hit me super hard. I'm kind of like, can take them or leave them. But I do like ones like this that set the game on a different trajectory, right? Like, you're like, oh, I'm going to kill you.
About that very quickly.
Yeah. And I like sort of flipping Limited on its head where you're like, okay, instead of trying to get your opponent from 20 to 0 or deck them or whatever it is you're trying to do, now it's all about protecting my Mechanized Production engine and how does that feed it and when do I go for it.
Especially if you put it on a creature or something like that.
Totally. That's the problem, right? Don't you usually just win anyway? Like,
Yeah, you don't
if you're
need
making an extra 2/2 for free every turn, don't you just like, I'll attack with them and you die, you know?
Yeah. You certainly don't need a million of them.
No. But that was a card that kind of slipped by. But I mean, it was a mythic rare, right? So it's not uncommon for that to, you know, slip through the cracks. Here's an interesting one. Which cards really surprised us one way or another? Or maybe some of them that we, you know, talked about in the set review, but we had a U-turn on.
Consulate Dreadnought, I think, was the biggest.
Agreed. Yep.
That's the 1-mana 7/11 Crew 6. It turns out this card is just a fine card.
Yeah, it is.
It enables improvise. There's a lot of 3-power creatures. It's just a card you can put in your deck and not be too unhappy with. So
yeah. And we didn't like it.
No,
we laughed at that card. Like that.
Yeah, we thought. Yeah. We're like, oh, this is terrible. This is the kind of card you should never put in your deck. And
right. Because it's not uncommon for us to say, oh, this card isn't that good, and then to be like, it's pretty good, right? Or this card's great, and be like, well, it was actually just pretty good. Like, you know, going a half a grade or a grade here or there, but this is like a 2-grade swing or a grade and a half. Like
this card's like a C+, and we
gave it a D- or something. Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe an F. I don't know. I don't remember exactly.
Maybe I don't think we F plussed it. Like, at least tell me we didn't F plus it. That's
I don't think so.
Okay.
Funnily enough, we have a card here which I think we both put in different places and somewhat opposite.
Oh, I know. I know
about the card.
I know.
First of all, Implement of Combustion, which I do think we underrated. I think everyone underrated, and so we ended up not realizing how big of a carrot Improvise was, especially in red because of Sweatworks Brawler.
Mm-hmm.
So Implement of Combustion ended up being a fairly high pick. And we didn't say it was unplayable. We clearly knew why it was in the set.
Yes.
We just thought it was just, a C, and it actually ended up being, I think, closer to like a B- than anything else.
Yeah, C plus B minus. Yeah, just like at least where you picked it. And I mean, I have it in our underrated cards list as well. And it was because the red one specifically fit into this very narrow gap that we really needed in the format, which was it was 1 mana for the implement. It was 1 mana to sacrifice it. The effect was almost irrelevant. Like doing 1 damage to a player was not where we should be focusing. And I think we saw through that at least somewhat, during the set review, but still that part, just who cares? You could almost take that away and it wouldn't matter. Also, it was red, and red and blue ended up being the premier, improvised deck. And the blue one costs 3 and it's in a totally different league. And so when you narrow it down like that, it put a lot of pressure on the red one. The red one ended up being the one that you needed because of, like you said, Sweatworks Brawler and stuff like that, because the blue one just didn't fill that role. You play it on turn 3, it doesn't get your Sweatworks Brawler out of turn early. And so the red one ended up being sort of the cross section. The other little thing that it had going for it as well is that you could sacrifice it without needing to target a creature like the green one, because the green one's more powerful by a lot. But you needed a target for it and really didn't want to put it on your opponent's creature very often. And the red implement, when you just needed to sack it and hit your land drop or whatever, it lets you do that too. So it really kind of just checked all the boxes just right. Even for a relatively low impact card, it really kind of hit.
Yeah, and it ended up just being a card that was just more important than it looked like it was going to be.
It kind of replaced the map for us, didn't it?
Yeah, it is what I thought Renegade map was going to end up being.
Yeah.
Augmenting Automaton is a card I think we underrated in the set reviews, but then I think I do even agree that we're going to see it subsequently on the overrated list, because I think it actually can it can live in both places.
It's in both, yeah.
Which I think because this is the 1 mana 1/1 that pumps for 1 and a black. I think it is playable in Improvise if you end up in a black Improvise deck with Fen Hauler or blue black with like Bastion Inventor. But then people start thinking it's a good card, and neither of those is correct. It's not unplayable and it's not a good card. It's just a playable. So it's interesting to see where that ended up landed, but I think we were a little down on it. I think you were more down on it than I was. If I
was,
correctly.
I think I was too.
I think I used the Sludge Crawler example and was pretty spot on with that.
No, you were not. That was wrong. That was still wrong.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that this is reasonable for is because you can improvise with it, and then it's like a serviceable enough creature in the late part of the game, even though I'm still like pretty unimpressed.
Yeah, it's basically a Llanowar Elf because it taps for mana, and then it also becomes a 5/5. So
it's a 5/5 Llanowar Elf for 1 colorless mana. That's your take on it. Wow. All right, let's take a look at the underrated cards. What are some of the cards that stood out to you? Even now, right? Like these are cards that you still see, and you're like, why is it still in the pack? That type of card.
Destructive Tampering is a good one.
Oh yeah, from the get-go too.
Yeah, this is Falter plus Shatter, which turns out 2 narrow effects that combine well is just really powerful, even if you wouldn't main deck a Shatter or a Falter. So you ended up always wanting 1 and maybe 2 in your deck. Aether Swooper and Aether Chaser. Both of these looked good, but I think they ended up being even better than they looked because of, again, how strong the Improvise was.
Yeah, so, like, specifically the Swooper.
The Swooper overperformed more. At the end of it, I think that was the best blue common. And it did not necessarily appear like that was going to be the case to begin with.
Not at all. The Aether Chaser looked strong for a common from the get-go. I think we gave it a pretty good grade. But yeah, the Swooper was a little more deceptive for sure.
And then Scrounging Bandar is the best green common. I think it just is. Over Prey Upon, over Druid of the Cowl.
Yep.
I don't think, we did not have that on our radar. So
no.
It's pretty interesting.
We both liked it. I remember us both really liking it.
Yeah. Do you think Scrap Trawler was underrated?
I don't remember rating it, but
yeah, I don't remember what we gave it.
I also don't know what it is.
We probably gave it an accurate grade, whatever it was.
Absolutely. What about overrated cards?
I actually disagree with one of the ones you put on the list, Ravenous Intruder, because I don't think the card was rated. Unless you saw a lot more people playing it than I did, I didn't really think that card.
So here, the reason I put it on the list is because I did see people play it. Now, agreed, it wasn't rampant. It wasn't like every draft you saw it. But what I think people did is they needed 2 drops. They would be playing some red aggressive deck and they'd be like, I need another 2. And they'd be like, I'd put Ravenous Intruder in my deck. Because I did see it on the battlefield multiple times. It wasn't like, a unicorn. It was like, oh, another Ravenous Intruder. And it's not. It just does not do what 2 drops need to do for you. And I found the card bad. I mean, I think it's just terrible. But I saw it way more often than I thought I would. I assumed I would see it not, right? It just wouldn't be a card that you'd see on the battlefield. But I did. It popped up from time to time. So that's why I put it on here. I just think it was one of those cards that's just terrible.
Yeah, I think that it is pretty bad, and I've never really... It's the kind of card I like being good, but it wasn't actually good.
Yeah.
Renegade Map actually I think was a good late addition, because as we started talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, this card's definitely overrated.
Oh yes, for sure.
So I think that I didn't draft very many because people just kept taking second pick maps, and I just don't think that was a good strategy.
What about Def Dismissal? I put it on the list again because people resolved it against me, and I don't even know if it's playable.
No, I don't think Def Dismissal is playable. And we kind of discussed this a little bit earlier, but Augmenting Automaton was also overrated at the same time, which is just a funny place to be. But it happened in this format a bunch. I feel like it's because, well, I guess Magic players I feel like are often not good at nuance. Cards either have to be unplayable or great, when sometimes they're just role players. Totally. And people have a hard time identifying that. Totally.
It just doesn't sound as cool to say it's somewhere in the middle. It sounds way cooler to say, it's OP or it's Garbo or whatever. Is this, I'm going to pause us here for the overrated cards thing because we got through those, but this is one of, if not the most divisive format that I've seen since I've been doing coverage, for example. Like the pros never agreed on this format ever. They still don't.
And you're lumping in Triple Kaladesh too, right?
Sure.
Like in terms of like the speed of the format and stuff like that.
All of this stuff. I mean, I go to the tournament before the Pro Tour and the Pro Tour, and like you and I get to go to one of the Team Channel Fireball limited meetings, and I'll poke around before I go in the booth on Friday to do the draft, to cover the first draft of the Pro Tour, and ask a bunch of different limited gurus. I'll go say, hey, Huey, what's up? Ben, what's up? Pat Cox, what do you think about this? And it was just all over the map, and it felt like it never settled down. It was crazy. Like this format just had people on such different assumptions and plans going in.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also feel that it was never solved to my satisfaction who was right, where it ended up. So
I agree.
I'm not 100% sure where. Like, I will concede that Aether Revolt Kaladesh was pretty fast, and that's part of the reason that I don't enjoy the format as much. I still kind of think that the Triple Kaladesh format's not as fast as a lot of people thought, but that debate will not actually ever get settled.
Yeah, the Whirler Maker guy thinks it's a little slower than.
Well, one of the things we say at work is all opinions are held.
Are held?
Yes. it doesn't mean they're all equally valid. It just means all opinions are held. People
That's
will.
great. You say that at work?
Oh yeah. But sometimes,
wow.
Yeah, people complain about everything. Basically, is a way to put it. But
what were some of the cards that were surprisingly main deckable?
Destructive Tampering was one of the ones that just screamed sideboard card and was just a great main deck card.
Totally.
Again, because of the double flexibility. Metallic Rebuke was a card which I thought did some decent work. I'm not, out there saying I would third pick it, but it was a playable, and it could counter it could basically trade up. You're trading your ninth pick for their second pick some of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. What about controversial cards? There was a couple that came to mind for me. They highlighted something I'll touch on when we talk about what we learned from the set later on. But they highlighted a typical trap that people fall into when it comes to card evaluation and how those evaluations evolve over the course of a set, which were the cards were Druid of the Cowl and Caught in the Brights, which are weird because how are these controversial cards, right? I mean, they're both just kind of solid to good playables, but what ended up happening was that people recognized that both Druid of the Cowl and Caught in the Brights weren't up to their normal standards, meaning that a 2-mana mana producer in green in a normal set tends to be a pretty good card. That usually ends up being one of the better commons in that color. And the pacifism effect for any given set, of which many, many sets have this type of effect, tends to be really good. It's usually the best common, and players in this format correctly noticed that in the case of Druid of the Cowl, there wasn't a lot of top end stuff to cast, and there weren't that many mana sinks, places to put your mana late in the game. So a card like Druid of the Cowl lost value. With Caught in the Brights, they noticed that there was multiple ways for certain decks to either blink or bounce their creature out from underneath Caught in the Brights and nullify it. And they adjusted accordingly, saying, okay, well, it's not as good as a pacifist effect normally is, where normally, unless your opponent's doing some sideboarding stuff, it just says, kill that creature, it's kind of gone forever. Yet I think that they overreacted to this and knocked down Druid of the Cowl and Caught in the Brights to, I don't really like those cards so much, where I'm still quite happy to draft and play those in my deck, even if my expectations of them aren't quite as high. So somehow these kind of bread and butter, mediocre to good cards became the controversial ones in the format. It was weird.
Yeah, again, this is one of those examples where I do think that, yes, Caught in the Bright certainly not as good, Druid of the Cowl certainly not as good as they looked, but then people overcorrect for that and end up, again, not being able to approach things with nuance. So
yeah,
I was on the side of both these cards not being that great for what it's worth.
Where's the gray area,
Yeah.
Okay, they're not that great, but are you ever not playing a Caught in the Brights in your deck?
No, I've never.
You're shining the brights, man. It's it's still making the cut. You have another card here for controversial cards.
Yeah, I don't understand this one. Oath of Ajani. So this is 1 green, 1 white mana enchantment that gives all your creatures a +1/+1 counter when you play it. For some reason, people just didn't play this card. I saw it happen
I don't get it either.
3 or 4 times. I know you were there for at least 2 of them.
Yes.
Where people just would not have this card in their deck. And I had just no idea.
I don't get it either. I played it in the pre-release in a green-white deck, and it was a house. I mean, the card just was play this, kill you. Yeah, it was great.
I saw someone not play it in a green-white deck that had Aviary Mechanic, and it was like a beatdown deck. It's just God.
I don't get
it.
I feel sick to my stomach now.
Yes, I understand. This is the classic. There's extra text on there that you don't use, which is that your planeswalkers are 1 cheaper. So therefore, people think the card is worse.
You know what that is? That's the vanilla test.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing we talked about when Ryan was here.
Yeah.
4 mana 5/5 and 4 mana 5/5 that says pay 7, you lose the game. People think the second one is worse.
Right. How funny is that?
Well, I guess if you get Mind Slavered, it is worse.
He mentioned that. And you know what? That doesn't count for Oath of Ajani, so.
Yeah. What were some notable first picks that could set the course of your draft?
One of them that came to mind you mentioned earlier was Tezzeret.
Yes.
Because like you said, the blue-black deck was heavy artifacts, and Tezzeret gets really good when you have a lot of artifacts, and without them, Tezzeret's kind of, not quite up to snuff for what you'd expect from a planeswalker.
The other one I have here is SRAM. The the master, not artificer, whatever it was,
Edificer.
something edificer. Yes,
Yeah.
it was like something very close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously SRAM was great. You want to put conviction in your deck once you have SRAM, but if you just put a SRAM in your deck without thinking about it, it might not be quite as good as it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, and you were always, at least for me, I was always like, it's a 50-50 on this vehicle or this good creature. I'm like taking the vehicle now. That would always, he would kind of inform a lot of your picks going down. All right, this one. I was talking to Adam about this earlier today because he played a lot of the format, and I was like, what was the biggest groan test? The card that you're just like, oh God, not that, right? And this typically isn't just the best card in the format or whatever, because yeah, you're annoyed by those, but they usually have answers. Hands down, he nailed it. Aether Whale.
Yeah, this is one of those cards where you're like, I've got this game locked up. How can my opponent get out of this? And it's like, Aether Whale, oh, none of my cards do anything. I guess I'm going to lose.
There's nothing quite like that feeling. When you look at your hand and you go, okay, I don't have an answer for this Aether Whale, but you look at your library, because there's always hope, right? There's always a removal spell or a bomb that you can draw. No, there's really not. There was no answer for Aether Whale in the format. You could not kill it. Your only way out was to chain together multiple removal spells in an attempt to just basically bounce it and get in for damage. And if the board was anywhere near stable, if they had a high life total, you just did not have ways to interact. The only possible ways were to have two removal spells with them lower on energy than being able to bounce it twice, where you go kill it with a sorcery speed removal spell and they go bounce it and you go in response, instant speed, kill it. And that was almost impossible as well. So honestly, I hate cards like that.
Oh yeah.
They take away your hope.
Yeah, and there's just not much you can do about it. Like,
no.
Your opponent just had to cast them. That was basically it.
That was it. Yeah. And it also finished the game pretty quickly. I just think that a lot of what makes Magic fun is that hope, that idea that something could come off the top of your library, even if it's unlikely, that could turn this thing around. And my favorite thing about Magic is interaction. And any of these type of mechanics or abilities that they put on cards that eliminate interaction, I always hate. I hate hexproof. I don't like this bouncing whale. I want to be able to kill my opponent's bomb, even if it takes a specific card from me, or even if I have to get kind of lucky to do it. When you just take that away entirely, it's just like, you look at your library, you're like, I could fan out my entire deck and show you I can never beat that whale. I just can't beat it. And I don't like that feeling. It
also led to like recursive game states where they're like, block your thing with whale, return my whale, play my whale, block your thing with, even when they weren't killing you with the whale, you still got those situations.
Totally.
Untethered Express is annoying because they just played on turn 4 and you're going to lose.
Yep.
Like, there are answers, but it's just like, oh, I can't block it this turn. Well, it's going to be a 5/5, then a 6/6, then a 7/7. So I guess that's that.
It was look at your hand. Do you have the answer? No, you're dead.
Yeah. And then Release the Gremlins is an interesting one because it's splashable, can kind of come out of nowhere. And it's one of the cards that transforms it into like, hey, I'm winning this game by a lot. It's like, oh, I lost my 3 best permanents and my opponent has 3 2/2s.
Yeah. Do you remember that match at the Pro Tour? With Yoel Larson and Brad Nelson?
I wasn't in the booth for that one.
Okay. What I'll do is I'm going to put a link to that round in the show notes. I was in the booth for that, and it was an incredible round. And let's just say Release the Gremlins had a little something to do with it.
That's fair. What was the most frustrating bad card to lose to, and what card will you not miss playing against?
Well, it's kind of funny because I don't think I ever actually lost to these. But Siege Modification and Aerial Modification were definitely like the not like this cards of the set. Oh, yeah. Everything's going so good, and they're like Aerial Modification on my, Iron Tread Crusher, take 9 or whatever, or take 8, and you're just like, no, I'm dead next turn. And you had worked so hard to like stabilize the board or whatever, and you just sort of die out of nowhere.
Well, those are the kind of cards where your opponent plays them, they cross their fingers, and they put their head on the table, and they're like, well, I know this shouldn't work, but if you don't have an answer, you're just dead. And it's just like, yeah, I don't have an answer. I guess I'm dead.
And there's something weird about that psychologically, right? Like, even though your opponent took on all that extra risk, and even though they made a play that probably on the whole is not profitable, right? It's probably a play that will lose them more games than it will win them. When you do lose to it, even though you know that, again, over the long term, you're getting the better of that transaction, it still just feels worse somehow than losing to like regular cards are good cards, even though it's like, who cares, right? Like it all comes out in the wash, but for some reason it messes with your head where you're like, I can't believe I lost to aerial modification, versus like if they just beat you down with a 6/6 trampoline green creature or whatever. It's weird. What colors did you ask about?
Well, what was the bombiest bomb, actually?
What was the bombiest bomb?
Yeah, this one's easy, I think. It's an Aether Sphere Harvester.
I do,
it's
too.
just 3-mana, 3/5 lifelink with like minor upsides, very easy to crew. You could even get it with Trophy Mage, which is just nonsense.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I know that some people like to throw out the demon, the
Herald of Anguish.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I think that it's not close. It's the Harvester.
I agree. I mean, 3 colorless mana is just...
You're just a lock to play it, and it's cheap.
Yeah. All right, this is an important one, and I'm curious to see. I think my answers, on each of these, but I am curious to see if you have any additions or if there's any arguments we need to have here, because this is kind of where we leave the format in many ways. What was the best common for each color? So white, I put Caught in the Brights with honorable mention to Dawnfeather Eagle. Do you agree with that?
I think I like Dawnfeather Eagle more.
Okay. I think you're not alone with that, by the way. And this is a hard one for me.
But it's kind of weird because it is a 5-mana spell where, like, you'll end up... If you have 2 Dawnfeather Eagles, you'll probably take Caught in the Brights over the third one, for example. But I think it is really close. So I would rather have Dawnfeather Eagle, but I don't think it's egregious to
I'm
take
curious.
Caught in the
Yeah, I'm
Brights.
curious what our listeners think. I still think I take Caught in the Brights over Dawnfeather Eagle, but man, that's a close one. Blue, Aether Swooper, right? Just full stop.
Oh, yeah, I think that's not close.
I put Daring Demolition for black, though I know there are some people that actually prefer Ether Poisoner to it. Where do you come down on that?
During Demolition, I don't think that's particularly close either.
Okay,
like,
you
yes,
think there's
it
a big
costs
gap
4
there?
mana, but you'll still just have 3 in your deck and be like, yeah, this is good.
Okay. Red, I have Ether Chaser. Yes, Chandra's Revolution and Chalk are good, but I do think the Chaser ended up being the best.
I think Chaser ends up being the best in the best red decks. It's a 3-power creature for Iron Tread Crusher because it's basically always going to make a creature the next turn.
Yep.
The 1/1. And the turn 2 Ether Chaser, turn 3 attack, make a Servo Sweatworks Brawler start is just like absurd. So I like Ether Chaser as the best one, followed by Revolution, followed by Shock.
Okay. Yeah, I have them in the exact same order. Green, ta-da, Cat Monkey, Scrounging Bandar. And you mentioned it before, but like I would have not guessed that I would like this card more than Prey Upon.
Or Drew to the Cow.
Yeah, or Drew to the Cow.
Yeah, it was the Scrounging Bandar, though.
And I also wanted to put Artifact on here just because it's such a heavy artifact set. And I put Iron Tread Crusher as the best common artifact, though the Implement of Combustion also was one that, you and I had just talked about. Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, I like Iron Tread Crusher more. But Iron Tread Crusher goes into more different decks. The Implement of Combustion is certainly a card that you will pick higher once you're already in the improvised deck.
Right. Okay, let's move on to the uncommons.
This was mostly pretty straightforward.
I think so too, yeah. White, I had Thopter Arrest.
Certainly. The fact that the card is exiled means that things like Aviary Mechanic and Acrobatic Mover won't free their creature later, which was just... That's the big difference.
Yep, for sure. I had Skyship Plunderer in blue. There's also the Winkin Raiders.
Yeah, I like the Plunderer, though.
I do too. 2 mana, come on.
Yeah.
Black, now this one is a little interesting. So the 3 cards, and I think they're all pretty close, is Gifted Aetherborn, Vengeful Rebel, and Fatal Push. I ended up settling on Gifted Aetherborn.
I like Vengeful Rebel more. I feel like the upside's higher, and not being double black. This card's like easily splashable if you have Unbridled Growths and whatnot.
And Fatal Push would be third for you or second for you then?
I have that as third. Fatal Push is just fine.
Yeah, that's
you always play it, but it's this is one of those cards that is because it's an A+ and constructed. People look at it and they're like, "Ooh, Fatal Push," but it's just like, nah, no.
It's fine. Yeah. I like the Gifted Aetherborn better than the Vengeful Rebel because while the mana cost is tough, I recognize that. I think that it does. It requires less setup cost, right? Like straight off, it's just you play it and it's just very good. Like it stabilizes your board and it attacks well. Where the Vengeful Rebel really does make you work a bit. I agree the upside's higher, but I don't think it's that much higher. And I think the downside is much lower on a Vengeful. Like the floor is a 3/2 for 3 is like very shrug worthy. Where the Gifted Aetherborn, anytime it hits the battlefield, you're going to be happy. Like no matter what, basically. So that's why I gave it the nod. You can let us know, by the way. Maybe tweet us or whatever if you think Gifted Aetherborn or Vengeful Rebel's better. I think that's a really close one. I have Hungry Flames for red.
Yep.
And Big Daddy, Ridgescale Tusker for
green.
The
uncommon Virtuous Gearhulk.
Yeah, unbelievable card.
Not particularly gross.
Just a stupid card.
Yeah, Untethered Express beats Pacification Array in the artifact section.
Yeah.
And I think Winding Constrictor is a clear winner in the gold section.
Yeah, I had to just mention the Constrictor. It's such a, we call it a mythic uncommon. I mean, the card's just unreal. Yeah. All right, this is a fun one. What's the worst card in the set? The card that's just last pick, the biggest blank.
Secret Salvage.
Yeah.
Just doesn't do anything.
It doesn't, literal nothing. Poor card. I remember I opened 2 of those in a sealed pool. I was like, all right, this is a fun one. Which card was the most begrudgingly playable? You're like, fine.
It's finally time for Loth New Sailback to make its mark.
Shine. Yeah.
Look, I'll fully admit Bastion Mastodon and Wayward Giant were much better than they looked. Somehow Loth New Sailback was about exactly as good as it looked.
All that flavor text, all that mediocre artwork. I had Bastion Inventor there as well. Excuse me, not Bastion Inventor. Bastion Enforcer.
Okay, that makes more sense.
I wrote it wrong on it.
Yeah, clearly, it is just a nonsense, just vanilla card that you'll put in your deck if you want to crew an Iron Tread Crusher. But
but that was the key. It was crewing an Iron Tread Crusher or crewing half of a Consulate Dreadnought, and that was relevant. It just was, and so you needed these 3 power creatures, and it did. One other one that I would put in the deck occasionally in the main if I was a little short was a Natural Obsolescence. I preferred not to. I like bringing those ones in out of the board, though. I did often main deck cards like Decommission. But Natural Obsolescence was the one that occasionally would sneak its way into my main deck, even though I was like, I prefer to start it in the board. But, sometimes you're a little short on playables or whatever. Or removal. Is there a card you're going to miss drafting?
No.
I honestly, I had to actually pulled up the spoiler and was like looking through all the cards. I'm like, do I care about any of these cards? A couple came up for me, but not really. The one that stood out was Whining Constrictor. There was something really cool about opening a Whining Constrictor, slamming it, and being like, oh, ship me those cat monkeys. I really just want to go off because the card was so powerful. But I kind of with you, man. I had to dig for this. It wasn't like, there wasn't a card that just jumped out to me. I kind of had to, dig around. But I will miss Whining Constrictor. I think that card was great. What was the Martialist card? And I think there wasn't one that really stood out to me, but the one that I did think of when I read this question was Leave in the Dust. Bouncing creatures for good tempo, good interaction at instant speed, but replacing the card is something that I really like. I think that's a powerful effect that's often a bit underrated. And even though it's expensive, 4 mana is not cheap to do this. In the way removal works now, it's a thing. 4 mana instant speed, deal with a creature even if it's temporary and replace the card is very real. And so I think that was a card that kind of typified, what it is that I'm trying to do in Magic the most, which is draw cards and bounce things.
Pacification Array is a card that plays to a lot of what I like to do, which is it's flexible. It's not particularly mana efficient. You're actually on the worst end of the mana deal at all times. But it removes something early and removes something late. It gives you a lot of options throughout the course of the game. It's the kind of card that I enjoy playing with.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one to evaluate, but ended up holding its own quite well. What's Marshall's soapboxiest card? This one's easy. It's Ornithopter.
Oh, yeah. But look, even just gauging by the number of tweets we get asking, hey, if you have X, would you play Ornithopter? And the answer is always just like, do not play Ornithopter.
Yeah.
Though,
what if I have? Yeah.
I will say this. Josh Adderleyden, Raptor, U.S. national champion, I think, winner of GP Vancouver in the mocks. He played 2 Ornithopters in his first draft deck at Pro Tour Aether Revolt.
Okay, what was his reasoning?
He had 3 copies of Tezzeret's Touch.
I can see that, actually.
I think it was correct.
I think I would do that. Yeah, because that's just like a win. Like it's a 3 mana hasted 5/5 dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually see that. Because you're in the fringes there. Like that isn't something that happens very often, but that's just unbeatable. Yeah, I approve of that. But every other time I've said no.
Yeah, he had literally 3 Tezzeret's Touches. So
that's just insane. What card do you still have to read when it's cast against you?
Aid from the Cow is a good one because
Yeah.
so I was like,
I don't
okay,
even know what the hell it does. Like, you get to look at
well, I
stuff
know it puts
and
permanence into play. The
free.
question
Yeah.
was if you miss what happens to it. I actually still don't know right now, and I'm not going to read it.
The one that I always have to read is Lightning Runner because I'm like,
Oh,
oh no.
it gives you 2 energy, then you pay like 6 to take an extra or
Yeah,
8.
it's 6 or 8. That's the thing I always do. And then it's like, does it get to attack again? Does everybody get to attack again? Does it have to be alive? And like, I know what it does conceptually, but I always have to just double check all the little, all the little numbers. When does this happen? When do they have to pay it? Like, if I kill it before combat, can I, that kind of thing. What was your most drafted card on Magic Online?
Aether Swooper. Partially because I just had 2 different decks that had 4 of them. Probably helped.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Even though people did think the card was eventually good, there's, I think, a time in the beginning where it was a little underrated, and that's when I did most of my drafts.
And you were ahead of the curve on it, too. I remember seeing you draft the Aether Swoopers, and you were onto it.
Yeah. I liked Aether Swooper, and again, I drafted a lot more early when it was underrated.
Yeah. Mine was Leave in the Dust, which is kind of cool. Oftentimes it's the card that I don't really like that much, but what usually this shows you is how much more you value a card than everybody else. Because you'll have a bunch of Foundry assemblers and kind of garbagey, colorless cards or whatever that you just end up picking up, but those don't make your deck, so you don't really care. It's the cards that are actually playable that you have the most of that you want to pay attention to. And Leave in the Dust was the one for me where I drafted it higher than most people, What card were you most excited about, but it disappointed you, sad face?
I have 2 actually. Planar Bridge at Mythic, because I really wanted to build a control deck with Planar Bridge and was just not even good at all. And then Efficient Construction that looked like a sick uncommon build around it just wasn't. So
are you sure it wasn't? I saw people build around it. Calcano loves it. I don't think it was either.
If you can see a consistent theme in our Sunset shows. Cards that disappoint me are build-arounds that don't get there because those are the things that I have most, the most fun with. And this I don't think got there.
For me, it was Trophy Mage. How is this card not great? It just seemed like it was going to be so good to go get free, playable, relevant spells. And yes, sometimes you had an Aethersphere Harvester and you're pretty happy with your Trophy Mage, but so often it got the Scry guy, and you're the Watchful Automaton or whatever, and you're like, ugh, or the stupid 3/1. And what I found was that normally a Trophy Mage, a 2/2 for 3 mana, would be holding its own enough since it replaced itself with a comparable spell, but that I was getting ran over still. It was such that this format was quick enough that a 2 toughness, 2 powered blocker wasn't really doing it. And I thought it would. I thought, well, I'll double block something or I'll trade it off for something, a 2-drop or something like that. And that just didn't happen often enough. So the tempo hit ended up being pretty negative. And the fact that it was hard to get really good things with it, the Lifecrafter's Bestiary and the Aethersphere Harvester were kind of the premier ones that you'd see people grab with Trophy Mage. But most of the time you were getting the junkier stuff, and it ended up being just like a pretty big disappointment.
In the finals of Grand Prix Mexico, it was team draft, which we talked about last week. And so Jacob Wilson had a Trophy Mage, and, his opponent, I don't remember who was playing against him, was like, what did you guys see for trophies? Because you get to see every card but your first, the first pick from each pack. And none of, I think it was Ben S., none of his teammates were like, I can't remember anything great. And Jacob plays the Trophy Mage and gets Aethersphere Harvester for his first pick.
Must be nice. That's pretty good. Okay, this is an important part, and this is where I ask you, Luis, to kind of put on your work hat here and talk to us about this set from a design and development aspect. How did this set fare? How were the mechanics? What were some of the wins? Maybe some of the losses, and what did you think about it from that perspective?
This is weird. I think part of it was I had drafted a lot of Kaladesh, and this didn't feel like it brought enough new to the table. So things like energy, for example, which was a theme in Kaladesh, was just much worse because there was less support for it in this format. Vehicles are just not a mechanic I like a lot of. Like, I think having some vehicles is fine, but it's not something that I would hold as like, this is a fantastic mechanic. And the +1/+1 counter theme just kind of faded too. It was very strong in Black, Green, and Kaladesh. And yes, you had it in Winding Constrictor in Aether Revolt, but past Winding Constrictor, it wasn't really a huge theme, right? So I didn't like that themes from Kaladesh were like not super well supported and ended up feeling the same. So they were present, but they weren't as good as you would want them to be. And again, not bring enough new to the table. The themes of the set, Improvise, I think, was a good mechanic. It has a lot of the hallmarks of things that are interesting, which is like it changes your pick order. The decks you draft are different because of it. But part of it, I think, is just overshadowed by how aggressive this format was.
Yeah.
And aggressive formats can have interesting mechanics. That is just, those things are definitely not mutually exclusive. It just happened that when you have an aggressive format, it puts more pressure on those mechanics because synergy is less important when the games are shorter. You see fewer cards. You have less time to assemble things. And Improvise is just such an aggressive mechanic that, yeah, it's cool that you get to draft Implements of Combustion and, Universal Solvents. But then when your opponent goes turn 3 Sweatworks Brawler, turn 4 Bastion Inventor, and you're just dead on turn 6, that, against a Menace creature and a Hexproof creature, that's not super interactive. That's not leading to a bunch of like really, really intriguing gameplay. And then Revolt really missed. And part of the challenge when you have themes limited is that if they're not powerful enough, then you don't get to see them play out as often as you would. Because how entertaining things are is not just about power level, but in limited it tends to put more emphasis on that. If your theme is not well supported, if it's not something that ends up playing out really well, and it's one of the main themes of your set, it's gonna feel a little disappointing. And I think Revolt was in that space because Revolt just didn't have the right combination of payoffs and enablers.
Right.
And it's not that Revolt is a bad mechanic or couldn't have worked. It just happened this format was fast enough, and the rewards you got for revolting were revolting. they weren't quite good enough. So you ended up with a kind of a theme that, yes, some decks had 2 Unbridled Growths and a Renegade map and like 2 Revolt cards, sure, but there wasn't a Revolt deck. And the sum total of all of this is that you've got a really fast, aggressive format. You've got an aggressive theme in Improvise, which I think was interesting. I do like Improvise. You've got Revolt, which didn't really quite get there. And you've got a bunch of Kaladesh themes that are somewhat weakly supported. The end result was just an okay limited format, not one that I felt compelled to play a lot of. So that's kind of how I ended up.
And, one of the other things that we should mention sort of from a bigger picture perspective is, you were saying how it was fast format and there was carryover stuff from Kaladesh. One of the key mechanics in Aether Revolt that carried over was vehicles. Like, those changed the way that the game's played in a major way by applying huge pressure. And cards like Iron Tray Crusher and any of the Untethered Express, as we work our way up the rarity scale, were major deals in every game that they came down on, and they changed the way the games played out. They just were able to attack with such huge creatures, and the vehicles were good. I mean, it was a vehicle world, and they certainly served us up that, but that does have a cost, right? When you're trying to set up this delicate balance with the Revolt and stuff like that, and your opponent's like attack you for 6, it's like, okay, it can be pretty difficult to get any of that more subtle interactions worked in there. So, it's a tough, it was a hostile environment, to say the least, for some of the more subtle interactions that you and I like to look for, at least late in the format. Okay. What were the takeaways? What did this format teach us? How did this format make us better at Limited? And the one that I had touched on earlier and that I want to reiterate here was the rating cards. It's on you to not overreact to how to rate these cards based on new information. And what I mean by that is a lot of us, you and I, Luis, do the show, and a lot of our listeners have practiced and worked alongside us to get good at evaluating cards and start building some confidence in their ability to evaluate cards. And of course, once you start playing the format, those card evaluations change. You notice things like what we talked about with Druid of the Cowl and Caught in the Brights earlier in the show. The thing is, you really, really need to be able to make subtle adjustments to your evaluations without overdoing it. And that is hard, and it seems to be a weakness of Magic players as well, as you mentioned earlier, Luis. But that's the thing that I'm really focusing on, is hearing good players say, Druid of the Cowl sucks, Caught in the Bright sucks, I don't want it in my deck. just is such a red flag for me of like, you are taking this idea that you had that was correct and taking it way too far. You need to adjust the rating and playability on these things marginally, not in such an extreme way, because you're really giving up a lot of value if you do that. And I think that that's the thing that really stood out to me of all the disagreements the pros had and we had and everybody had about how this format plays and what cards are good and stuff is make sure that you have some granularity to the way that you adjust. Make sure that you're not the person that just says, this card's great, and then it doesn't work out for you. And you go, this card sucks. That there has to be some level of gradient in between that. And that's the thing that I'm going to remember from Aether Revolt is to remember that a card can be worse than it normally is without being bad.
Yeah, I think that if the takeaway is that people are just not good at nuance. Nuance is difficult, and trying to figure out where things land is a challenge. So it is good to know what the biases can be and kind of how to adjust for them.
All right, one more question before we get to our preview cards for Amonkhet. What was your favorite card in the set?
Whirler Maker.
The set being Aether Revolt. You can't just say Whirler Maker every time you don't have an answer. Is it really your favorite?
I have really enjoyed playing with Whirler Maker. Okay, I will be completely honest about Whirler Maker for the first time here. I know the card is not great, but here's what I like. I feel
so much better, by the way. This is very cathartic. Keep going. Let it out. Let's let it all out.
Here's what I like is that it does provide inevitability and it does provide value. And maneuvering those games with even an overcosted card like Whirler Maker was very fun for me. Okay. So Whirler Maker was what made me have more fun in Aether Revolt than any card in Aether Revolt. So
okay. Yeah, it's funny. I don't normally care about this too much, and I don't really hear, but I actually had a hard time finding a card that really stood out to me as like, this is my favorite. The card that I just went with my gut on was Greenbelt Rampager, the elephant.
It's a very cool card.
It's just a cool card, and I like its simplicity in the sense that it's just big for not that much mana, and I like some of the neat things you could do with Revolt and Energy and things like that with it too. I also like that it wasn't optional if you had the Energy, it just gobbled it up. I always thought that was kind of cool. So Greenbelt Rampager somehow ended up being my favorite card from the set, though I will say that none of them really jumped out where I'm just like, oh, it's Mistraven or whatever. It was like I kind of had to dig for this one a little bit. Okay, well, that's it. That is us saying goodbye to Aether Revolt. We had a good run, and now it's time to look forward to the future. And it looks like we're going to be visiting Amonkhet very soon. In fact, we're going to be doing the Commons and Uncommon set review next week. For all of you waiting for that, you can expect that hopefully early in the week. And I'll be doing the video version of that on YouTube, as well as, of course, the one that you'll get as you get your podcast. And to get us there, we've got preview cards. We've got 5 exclusive limited resources preview cards. One of them had been previewed already and actually printed already in the past, but we've got 4 brand new ones.
A cycle of cyclers.
Yes, indeed. And let's get into these. We'll start with Vizier of Tumbling Sands. This is the blue one. We got one of each color. 2 and a blue for a 1/3 human cleric. These are all uncommon, by the way. You can tap it to untap another target permanent. You can also cycle it for 1 and a blue, and cycling, for those of you that haven't seen it, just says discard this card, draw a card. So you pay 1 and a blue and discard it, and then you get to draw a card. And whenever you cycle it, you get to untap target permanent. This is a cool little card. Lots of neat little tricks you can do. The one that stood out to me right away, Luis, and we won't get too deep into this, of course, because we're going to talk about this in depth next week. Though, what were the exert creatures?
Yes, that when you attack with them, you can make it so they don't untap next turn, and in exchange, you get a bonus like target creature can't block or deal 4 to a non-dragon creature.
Or the creature just gets bigger. That happens on some of them. Yeah, and this lets you kind of have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it also lets you ambush creatures. They attack with a 2/2, you Vizier to untap a 3/3. It's funny because when you look at a cycling card, it's really just 2 different cards. It's kind of a trick, right? Yeah. This is a spell that's 1 in a blue, untap or permanent, draw a card, and it's also this creature. This is going to be played more as the spell than the creature. Whereas a lot of cycling cards, like for example, there's like a cycle of when you have a cycle of cards that are more powerful up front, you're going to be casting them and only cycling them if you're like mana screwed. Like, for example, like the 4/4 flyer for 4 that's a bomb rare.
Mm-hmm.
But Vizier is a actual spell, which sometimes you cast if you're in dire straits.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and of course, this one, Vizier Tumbling Sands is incredibly contextual, right? Untapping depends on what you're untapping, right? Like you might want to do that over and over.
Well, it's a mana creature too, so.
Is it? Oh, it just untaps a permanent. Sure. Yeah. That's
so
really flexible.
You can play it on turn 3, then play a 5-drop on turn 4. So.
Okay. Next one is Shafet Monitor. What does that one do?
It's 5 and a green for a 6/5. It is a lizard.
That's big.
It is cycling 3 and a green, and when you cycle it, you can search your library for a basic land or a deserts card and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. It also has the reminder text: "Do this before you draw," which is good because Crows and Tusker, which was a card that had a very similar effect back in Onslaught. People always forgot which order things went in. Yeah. So this is 4 mana to ramp for 1 and draw a card, a cantrip ramp spell. But it's also a 6/5 when you don't need lands anymore. So this card's just great.
This is just awesome. Also, the land does hit the battlefield untapped. I don't know that that'll be super relevant very often in Limited, but it's something to consider.
Yeah,
this card's fantastic. Yeah, I love this card because you would definitely pay 4 mana for draw a card and ramp out a basic. Right. I mean, that's a card that, if you needed fixing or ramp for anything, you would do it. And then, like you said, if you draw it late in the game, you just slam it as a massive 6/5. I like it. Stir the Sands is next. This is 4 black for a sorcery. It says create 3 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So that's pretty good already, right? 6/6 for 6 or 6 power and 6 toughness for 6 mana spread out over 3 possibly relevant creature type tokens is pretty good. And then it's got cycling for 3 and a black. And so once again, you can pay 3 and a black and discard this card to draw a card. But when you cycle it, you get a 2/2 zombie. You get one of the tokens instead. So it's like a Nimble Innovator kind of. It
is. It's a 2/2 cantrip or an instant speed, by the way. Or because remember, you can cycle whenever. Or you can pay 6 mana for 6/6 worth of power and toughness. It's
great.
Also a great card.
Great card. Jeez, a 2/2 flash cantripper for 4 mana, or this board changing 6 power and 6 toughness is awesome. Stir the Sand seems really good to me. This next one's really good too. I'm not gonna lie. Deem Worthy is 4 and a red for an instant. It does 7 damage to a creature. Should be enough in most scenarios, but you can cycle it for 3 and a red, and if you do, it does 2 damage to a creature.
Yeah, it's a very powerful card. This is one of the ones that you're going to want to cycle it way more often because you'd love to just pick off a creature and draw a card. But sometimes they'll have the 5/5 in play and you'll just deem it, unworthy. Bam.
Indeed. Card seems great. Man, these cards are super powerful. The last one is Renewed Faith. Now, this is a reprint, right?
It is. It's from Onslaught. So this is 2 and a white instant. You gain 6 life. Cycling 1 and a white. And when you cycle it, you gain 2 life.
You just always cycle this? I mean,
this is the kind of card where you cycle it like 90% of the time, and then when you're in a very tight race, you'll cast Renewed Faith.
6 is a lot of life.
Yeah, it's a powerful card. It's funny seeing it as uncommon because it was a common and reads as a common, but it makes sense in this cycle, and of course, it had to be uncommon to go along with the rest of them.
Right. Anyway, these are really powerful cards, and they make me very excited for Amonkhet to come out, especially seeing 2 of these powerhouse uncommons be 6-drops. I want to do stuff in the late game. I miss my mana sinks. I miss them in Aether Revolt. Once I started drafting the Cube and the Modern Master sets, I was like, oh, I have stuff to do all over the place. Flashback cards and expensive cards, and I like that. That is a part of Magic that I definitely missed during Aether Revolt, and I didn't realize it until I stopped, I think. But these all give me hope for that too, where I can play these for 2 or 4 mana. But then also, pay 5 or 6 and get some big effect later in the game. Exciting stuff. And just from what I've seen from Amonkhet, it looks really good for us. Like it is right up our alley, Luis. So I'm certainly excited to dig into that. I think it's going to be much, much different than Aether Revolt was by feel, Okay, that's going to do it. Those are our preview cards. Again, next week, the big Amonkhet Common and Uncommon set review show. We're going to have it out as soon as we possibly can for you so that you can get a chance to listen to it, excuse me, before the pre-release fires up, and look forward to that. I want to remind you that the Limited Resources is brought to you by channelfireball.com, the place to go on the internet for everything you need, Magic related. And, you can find all the new stuff on there from our content, but also everything you need to buy. If you need singles or if you want to pre-release Amonkhet, you can get on there and they'll ship it to you as soon as they possibly can. They have a full selection of sealed product for you. You can get boxes. What do they call the fat packs now? I can't remember. Whatever. I think they changed the name of them. But anyway, you can get some of those packs and, invite your friends over for a booster draft. And they'll get those things shipped out to you just as quickly as possible at channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, that's easy to do. I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. We're always there. You can always come say hi, ask us questions, that kind of stuff. We love hearing from you. And anything you need related to the podcast as far as finding links and related to what both Luis and I do, our streams, writing, we do any of that kind of stuff, you can find on lrcast.com. Right on the front page, there's a bunch of links to all of our stuff. All right, that is going to do it for the Aether Revolt Sunset Show. Bye-bye, Aether Revolt. We'll see you sometime down the road.
See you later.
All right, are you ready, Luis?
I've been promised some good packs, so we'll see.
Let's just say we're going to have a hard time setting the line on these ones.
All right.
So, in my hands... By the way, we're let's stump Vargasing here if it wasn't obvious to the listeners.
I needed something to make me feel better after getting crushed by Owen.
Okay, this is not. You shouldn't have said that. So the pack I have in my hand came from our listener Ben Wallace.
Uh-huh.
The pack, the set that this pack is from is called Iced Sight. Ein Spiel von Richard.
This is the German Ice Age.
German Ice Age. I'm going to open here. Now, I'm going to read you the title of each of the cards. How many do you think you can get just from the title? I don't know how German these titles are, by the way. Like, they may have some of the same words in English.
I could get like half.
No way. I'm taking the under. You are so... All right, let's do it. Let's see how many you can get. Oh man, this is going to be gas. Do they put these in? Do these have set symbol things on them so I can see what the rare is? Or
no, Ice Age did not.
All right, well I'm just going to go for it then. All right, first one, Bernhardina.
Oh, I'm not going to get any of these cards.
No. You might get this one. Yeah, you might get this one.
Bernhardina?
No, not this one. You're not getting that one. That one's. I'm already putting it aside. I also don't know what it is.
Okay.
I have no idea. Let me see what it says. You can. It says in German. I'm translating it as I go. A blue or green card of your choice that you controls. You can, I guess, get it back to your hand or something. It's a white card. It's 2 and a white for a 1/1.
I'll take your word for it, I guess.
Yeah, I actually don't know what that card is either. All right, this one you might be able to get, and I'm gonna give you a couple of hints here too. This is Keldoranische Frostbestie.
Oh, Geldoran Frostbeast.
You did it.
Yes,
you did it.
I don't know what the card does though.
It says destroy. Let's see. Until a combat, a creature that frost. Okay. Basically, it looks like it's got some type of death touch thing going on. Okay, this one. Maybe you'll get this one. It's called. Well, in English, it would be Anarchy.
Oh, this is just destroy all white permanents. 2 red.
Oh my God, you've got 2 of the 3. Ständige Ernährung.
Wait, Geldoran Frostbeast is 3 green white 2/4, right?
Sorry, what?
Geldoran Frostbeast is the 3 green white 2/4.
Yes.
Okay.
With the cool artwork from Mark.
Yeah, it looks like a slime, like a snowman kind of like weird thing. I don't know.
That's it. All right. Ständige Ernährung. Erneuerung.
Okay.
You know this one too, because the artwork's it stands out, but you're not getting that one. Falsche Vertraute.
I don't know what this is.
Do you know what falsch means in German?
Mm-hmm.
It means like wrong, lying, bad. I'll describe the artwork for you. There's some type of alien thing coming out of a lady's head. And that's the creature, by the way.
I don't know this.
It's a 3/1.
Oh, Foul Emissary. This is a 2 and a black for a 3/1.
Yep.
Can't block.
Yep.
And you can like pay 1 and a blue to bounce it or something like that.
No, you can. It says black, pay 1 life. Put it back in your hand. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Oh man, I wonder if you know this word in German. You probably know. You probably don't. Schutzkreis gegen Schwarz.
This pack is ridiculous.
Do you know what Schwarz means?
No.
It means black.
Oh.
Do you know what gegen means?
Oh, just circle of protection black?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Schutzkreis. That means protection circle.
Right.
They literally translated it. Strahl der Vernichtung.
I don't know.
No, you don't. Steinhagel. No, you should know this one. Stein. What does that sound like?
Stein?
Yeah, Stein.
Stein? I don't know.
Sounds like stone.
Oh. Stone giant?
Steinhagel. Stone rain.
Oh.
Wow, you're bad at this.
I don't speak German. This is a setup.
Hey, you said half. You said half. Bergziege.
I was kidding, obviously.
Bergziege.
Whatever, man. I concede. I'm done with all this. Do you have like a real pack for me to do?
I do. I do. And you know what? I bought it.
Oh. Okay.
You know where I bought it? Channelfireball.com.
Okay.
I bought it just for this. This is in English. This is in English.
How many cards are in the set? Or the pack?
8.
8. So this has to be... This Fallen Empires then?
No, it's...
Homelands.
The Dark.
Oh, the Dark. You know, this is the first 7 I started playing. I'm going to get all 8.
You're going to go 8 for 8?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I'm being ambitious here because this German pack just like tilted.
Hey, what was the rare from our German pack?
I don't know.
I guess I don't really know. I won't really know. Heilung? No, that can't be.
No, Anarchy was the rare, I think.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. I don't know.
All right. It wasn't Mountain Goat, which was the one that you got wrong at the end and that eventually threw you off the edge. Okay. English cards. Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
By the way, half. Come on, man. Scarwood Hag. Dude, these are impossible. Do you know the artwork?
I like vaguely remember this card.
Yeah. Well, you're going to go like 8 for 8. So.
One and a green for a 1/1.
Yes, this is right.
I think you pay like...
I'm going to be very lenient with this.
So you pay some amount of green mana to regenerate one of your creatures, I think. Or maybe she gives Forest Walk. It's like one of those two things.
Okay. You're very close. So it is the Forest Walk. She's got 2 activated abilities. The first one, you got close enough. It's green, 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 tap. Target creature gains Forest Walk.
All right, yeah.
Well, what's her second ability? I'm going to give you a hint. It also has to do with Forest Walk.
Oh, target creature loses Forest Walk.
Yeah, tap it.
Yeah.
What a terrible...
Well, you need Scarwood Hag to fight their Scarwood Hag.
Oh, right. That's right. You get those Scarwood Hag mirror matches.
Yeah.
Oh, this one's got really cool artwork from Mark Tadine. It's Curse Artifact.
Curse Artifact. It's I think it's black, and it's an enchant artifact, and I think it makes it so the artifact deals 2 damage every turn to the controller.
I'm giving the... It's actually 2 black to cast it, but you're right. During his or her upkeep... by the way, I'm reading non-oracle text, obviously.
Yeah.
Controller of target artifact may choose to bury target artifact.
Otherwise,
which, by the way, is really poorly worded because that sounds like you could just bury any target artifact.
Yeah.
If controller chooses not to bury target artifact, curse artifact does 2 damage to him or her.
Yeah.
You got it. Festival.
1 white, prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn, instant.
When can you play it?
Only before blockers are declared?
No. I did not know this about Festival.
Only after blockers are declared?
No.
Only during your opponent's upkeep.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
You got that. How did you know that? Like, I know you didn't know it off the top, but how did you go from the logical weird attacker thing to their upkeep?
There was no other time which I could imagine thinking when you could play.
There's a lot of other times, but it is during their upkeep. I'm giving you that, by the way. These are really, really hard. Like, this is difficulty level, 10 here. Man, the artwork for this set, by the way, is just stunning.
I do really like the dark, actually.
It's really good. Murk Dwellers.
3 and a black 2/2, and then when it attacks, it gets +2/+0.
If not blocked, yes.
Oh, okay.
Squire.
1 and a white for 1/2.
Ding. Goblin Rock Sled.
1 and a red for a 3/1 trample.
Yes.
And when it has like a weird clause. When it attacks, I think I want to say you bury it after it attacks unless you pay 1 and a red or something weird like that.
You're not too far off. It looks like it's an early exert.
Oh, it doesn't untap for a turn after you attack with it?
Yeah, but there's one other clause, and if you get it right, I'm giving you credit, and if you get it wrong, you're not getting credit.
If you control no mountain, sacrifice it.
Oh, you're so close. It can't attack unless an opponent controls at least one mountain.
Gotcha.
All right. I will give this one. You get one more shot at this.
All right.
If you can tell me what it says on the creature type line.
Well, obviously it's a goblin, but I know it's something else also. Goblin Berserker?
Yeah, you're way too ahead of the game. It says summon rock sled.
Oh, good lord.
It's so bad.
All right.
But that's okay. You're still right in there. Riptide. It's a bunch of skeletons having a little swimmy dip in the ocean.
Yeah, it's like, I want to say tap all non-flying creatures, but
oh, you're so close.
What is it? Is it like 2 and a blue, tap all creatures your opponents control?
It's close. It's blue instant. All blue creatures become tapped.
Oh,
it's a hateful card. All right. You got to redeem yourself here. You've done really well. You have. But this last one, you got to get this. It's Goblins of the Flarg.
Oh, this is a classic one. Mm-hmm. This is red for a 1/1. It has Mountain Walk, and if you control any dwarves, sacrifice Goblins of the Flarg.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Nice work, man.
It's a mountain goat with a drawback.
It is, because you wouldn't want to put any upside on it. Yeah. So you went 6 and 2 for that, which in my mind is really good. Like your line was absurd. There's no way you're going to get 8. Nice work. That was good. You've redeemed yourself. You're back in my good graces.
All right. Well. I feel like I have some work to do here to uphold my reputation, but we'll see if I can improve her next time.